Hello, friends and enemies. Welcome to Horror and Inconvenience, where things are usually spooky and always weird. Welcome to my first reading wrap-up. I have no idea what I'm doing. I thought I would cover all of the books that I read in September, so you guys could see how excessively miscellaneous my reading habits are. I'm going to try and embed some little quick reviews into this one, since I didn't really feel called to do a full review of any of these, either because so many people had before, or because I just didn't have enough to say. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so I made no decisions prior to filming this about what order I was going to do it in, so maybe I'll do it loosely by genre? We'll start with comics. First off, I continued 2 manga series I've been reading. I will put the pictures somewhere up here. But I read volumes 2 and 3 of Happy Sugar Life, which is a really weird kind of thriller melodrama. I haven't decided if I like it yet, but I do know that I can't stop reading it. And then I read volumes 9 through 11 of The Promised Neverland, which, if you don't already know about it, what are you doing? You should be reading it. It's about a group of kids who are raised in what seems to be a happy orphanage, only they find out they're actually being raised as food for the demons that live outside the gates, and they hatch an escape plot. It's really thrilling, the characters are compelling, and the art is wonderful. So read that, and you can watch the anime if you want to, although it's really just the same frames and color. My final comic for this month was The Hidden Witch, sequel to The Witch Boy, both by Molly Knox Ostertag. These are young readers' queer, cozy witchcraft stories with slight spooky elements. They're delightful. I think everyone should read The Witch Boy, and The Hidden Witch was a worthy sequel. I don't have a ton more to say about it. There's nothing I can really tell you about this one without spoiling the first one. Read them. They're queer, they're cozy, they're a little spooky, they're witchy. I just remembered Junji Ito's books are technically comics too. My actual final comic for the month was Censor, the new novel by Junji Ito. It's interesting how some of his more recent works seem to have cottoned on to the concept of, if not a happy ending, then at least an ambiguous one, where before they tended to be incredibly bleak, and any heroes either died or were disillusioned by the end. This and the last one, Love Sickness, both had sort of heroic white knight figures in them. This is the inside of the cover. I mean, if you look at that imagery, you can kind of see some of the thematic elements here of the golden hair versus the black, the shining lights. I don't know what I think of this new trend. I mean, I would say my favorite Junji Ito, aside from Uzumaki, because, you know, basic, is probably Gyo, because it's just so grotesque and so bleak, and the absolute lack of any hope or any human ability to affect what's going on is kind of my favorite part. I don't know. Guess the guy's got range. Don't worry though. Still terrifying. Especially if you think hair is particularly gross. This one's all about hair. And, yeah, it'll ruin you. Now let's talk kids' books. My first young readers pick for this month was Barakah Beats, which is actually coming out later this month, but the ARC was available to me at work, so I grabbed it because it looked cute, and indeed it was cute. It's about a Muslim girl finding her identity in a new school by becoming the female member of a Muslim boy band. Just charming. I was so charmed. I couldn't put it down. I don't want to say too much about the religious elements because I know nothing about Islam, but I do have to say that one of the strengths of this book is that it provides an extremely diverse cast of Muslim characters, and as a kid who grew up in a town where if anyone I knew was Muslim, I had no idea, I know that picking this book up and experiencing such a variety of Muslim characters all at once like that probably would have done a lot for my growth as a person in our society, and I hope it'll do the same for a lot of kids. Looking forward to this one coming out. My other young reader's pick for the month was Rise of ZomBert. This is about a zombie cat. It's kind of like a Pet Cemetery concept with a Bunnicula tone. Needless to say, it's delightful. I recommend the hell out of it. I don't do starred ratings, but if I did, this one would have several of those stars. I think it's very important that you know that the illustrations are also delightful. They have spooky elements. Here you can see that ZomBert is a little bit grotesque, but at the same time it's very cute and charming. It's good. I like it. You should read it. It takes about an hour and a half to read, so do it. My YA read was not spooky, but I cannot say enough about this. A Clash of Steel, a Treasure Island remix. God. Okay, so you take the best classic novel in the English canon. Yes, I said it. Treasure Island is the best novel ever written in English. The best one. And you add lesbian Chinese pirates. I mean, so this is a version of Treasure Island set in a culture where instead of Blackbeard and Anne Bonny, the dominant pirate story is that of Zheng Yisao, known for some reason to English speakers as Qing Shi. I couldn't figure out why that was because it sounds completely different, but there you go. Apparently her real name was Zheng Yisao. And she was a real 19th century Chinese pirate queen. At the height of her career, Zheng Yisao commanded a fleet of ships so large she essentially ruled her part of China. There was an escalating series of tensions with the empire until eventually Zheng Yisao did end up surrendering due more to the internal politics of her fleet than the external threat, and ceasing her activities as a pirate queen on the understanding that she'd still get to keep her ship and her place of power in her society. Now, Zheng Yisao pretty much fades out of the historical record. We know she stayed an important part of the criminal underworld and that she lived to a ripe old age. We don't know much else. This book imagines, well, I don't want to give too much away. Let's just say that in the shadow of Zheng Yisao's legacy, a Chinese girl named Xiang ends up with a treasure map to her supposedly forgotten hoard. She bargains her way onto a small merchant ship, a former pirate ship, captained by Huanak and her daughter, An. And of course, Shang and An fall in love, and it's great. It's so cute. It's delightful. I loved it so much. Uh, I've seen many adaptations and read many adaptations of Treasure Island. It really is one of my favorite stories of all time. This one had twists that I didn't see coming. I mean, I saw the first twist coming, and so will you, but there's more. I was surprised and delighted. I was really just on board the whole way through. The writing is lovely without being overly poetic or obscure. The romance is charming, and there's just enough maturity to the characters and depth to their arcs that, even though you'll know the broad strokes of the story already, you are really rooting for them the whole time. It's so good, and yeah, if you like lesbian pirates, read it, and if you don't like lesbian pirates, leave my channel. What are you doing? As far as adult novels, like general literary fiction goes, this was a pretty good reading month too, because my picks were No Longer Human and Lemony Snicket's new novel, Poison for Breakfast. Poison for Breakfast is a weird little book. Literary is definitely the right description for it. After eating his breakfast, one day Lemony Snicket receives a note under his door that says, "You had poison for breakfast." And this book is sort of a record of his philosophical musings as he wanders around his neighborhood trying to figure out how he could have been poisoned, by whom, and if he's going to die. That's all. That's all that happens. I mean, like a lot of Daniel Handler's work, that's Lemony Snicket's real name, by the way. And this is actually the first adult novel he's written under the pseudonym, which he normally saves for kids and YA publications. But, yeah, like much of Daniel Handler's work, it's really just a collection of his ramblings and his witticisms. Kind of Flaubert via Oscar Wilde. As you can tell, that's pretty high praise. I like him a lot. It's not a series of unfortunate events, but it's definitely worth reading. Plus, it's beautiful. It looks great on your shelf. It's short, it's sweet. I liked it. And I finally got to Osamu Dazai's No Longer Human, which has been blowing up like crazy. I'm sure if you are on the the bookternet, you already knew that. This is a really beautiful book. Osamu Dazai was writing in post-war Japan, and there's more bleakness to the bleak modernism we think of as really affecting the writers between the wars in our society. That really carries over to post-World War II because, of course, you know what happened to Japan in World War II. Do you? I mean, if you're American, you might not. So, this is about Obayozo, who doesn't really consider himself part of the human race. His whole life, alienation has plagued him. He puts on a comic mask and tries to be socially pleasant and say yes to everybody, and generally experiences the kind of crippling social anxiety that reaches for the absurd. No matter what he does, good or bad, he sees it as further evidence that he's not really one of the people he's surrounded with. Of course, this leads to a lot of mental health problems, which are dealt with very deftly with a mix of tenderness and absurdity that I think is in some ways unsurpassed. Of course, it's important to note here that Dazai did die by suicide. I guess knowing that, there's an added layer of painful intimacy with the narrative. Yeah, this is too hard to talk about. Suffice it to say that it's a wonderful book, and if you're in a strong enough mental state to take it, because this is not something that I would be comfortable reading during a mental health low period personally, and it's very important that you take care of yourselves. But I certainly think it's something everyone should read if they can. Juan Plagued by Visions put it on his most disturbing books list. I don't know if I quite agree with that assessment, because I did find it very touching and moving, and that to me stood out more than its distressing qualities. Or maybe I've just encountered way too much depressing existentialist fiction in my life and I'm numbed to it. But I think Juan, based on the things he said, has also encountered a lot of it. So could just be a difference of opinion. But thanks to him and to also everybody on the whole internet for recommending this one. I love it and I recommend it in turn. Final thing I want to talk about in this wrap-up is Ancestral Demon of a Grieving Bride by Hoahwah. I first encountered him in an anthology of indigenous poets and immediately knew that his harsh gothic style was right up my alley and put this on my TBR. It wasn't just the cover. I swear I read one of his poems and liked it before I saw the cover. But look at the cover. Look at it. Look. You can see there are some flags sticking out of this book. I'm not normally a book flag type of person, but I had to remember where all the good stuff was, which was difficult because there was good stuff on every page, so I limited myself as best I could. It's very sort of Western Gothic, as the cover image might suggest to you. There's a lot of usage of violent and horrific imagery, as well as sort of folk horror imagery, often used to describe seemingly ordinary or even peaceful things. Here's an example from the poem Last Comanche Allotment at the Edge of the World. The farmhouse stands dusk on the hill. Clouds are slanted. Sunset slides back down into its blood bucket. Flies encrypt secrets in the sky. It's all that good. You should read it. I love the use of horror imagery in poems to bring out the violence in seemingly peaceful scenes. It's my favorite technique, my favorite literary technique probably at all. I'm a sucker for it. Loved this. Will be reading Hoahwah's other work. Okay, that wraps up my wrap-up for September. I hope I did the thing right. This month I'm going to be sticking more or less to a spooky theme, and it looks like the next thing I put up is probably going to be a Bunnicula reading blog. So, you know, it's going to be good. Bunnicula's great, and you should watch it. Do the algorithm thingies.